I absolutely grew up with a fixed mindset. And there was this pressure to know the answer. There was this pressure to have to have it all figured out. And so I really went through so much of my life feeling like I had to have the answer, and the self-imposed pressure that creates, that there even is like the one perfect answer, right? Like I believed that, and I believed that I had to know what that was and how to have it all figured out. And
Hello, and thank you guys for joining us today. I'm your host, Danny McFarland, and I am super excited to introduce a new friend of the show, but a longtime friend of mine, Donna Bond. Welcome.
thank you, Danny. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm truly blessed and honored to have you here. I've been for a long time wanting to get you on. So I'm very, very excited that we're here together today. And I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about Donna. Donna Bond is a soul-centered catalyst for personal transformation. She believes that when we do the work individually to trust our higher self and love our human self, the ripple effect changes the world. Donna holds a master's degree in spiritual psychology with an emphasis in consciousness, health, and healing from the University of Santa Monica. Donna supports clients across the globe to evolve into new heights of meaningful success, personal fulfillment, and spiritual aliveness using the principles and practices of spiritual psychology. Wow, that's amazing,
That
Donna.
sounds pretty good when you read it, Danny. I love it.
like,
Yeah, I'm
I'll,
like, wow, who's that girl?
I'll be your introduction every No, I love it. And I'm going to come back to it actually, but there's something in there. I was like, man, that resonates so deeply for me. And I feel like that's going to be the catalyst for a lot of the conversation that we have today. But if you could, I know that I get asked this question a lot. What exactly is spiritual psychology? And I've heard you talk about it, and I'm like, man, Donna says it much better than I do.
Oh,
And I would love for you to share
yeah.
how you sum it up.
Yeah, I sum it up by saying it's a technology. And it's a technology that teaches us that everything that's happening in our world, in our life, in our experience is giving us the opportunity to learn and grow and evolve and essentially go to our next level of potential, or our next level of becoming, or, whatever's around the next corner, I like to think. So it's so fluent and fluid, and it's so dynamic, spiritual psychology. And most of us are trapped in physical reality, right? And we are over identified with things that we can see and touch and feel. And spiritual psychology invites us into seeing all of those same things, but through a different lens, through a lens of our soul, through the lens of our higher self, through the lens of our spirit, through the lens of our original wisdom, as I like to call it. Or most basically, and really most importantly, through the lens of love. And it's like when we look through the lens of love, everything that we see looks completely different because we're essentially seeing things from a different place. And, I think using an analogy of an elevator, like a glass elevator, is always a good one, because when you're at the bottom of that elevator, you're sort of trapped in the four walls of your own life, and you don't have a lot of space down there. Everything kind of looks the same. You know your way around. It's super familiar and super comfortable. And, you've got the lay of the land and you understand the terrain. But when that elevator goes up, to the 100th floor, then all of a sudden, everything that you see is from a completely different perspective. And the things that you thought were these big insurmountable obstacles, these big scary dragons that you might have been up close and personal with when you're trapped in the bottom floor of the elevator. Now you're looking down on them and they seem pretty insignificant and they don't seem as scary. And when you're on that top floor, there's all this space and spaciousness. And you get perspective, right? You get a different perspective, a higher perspective. And I think that's what it's like when we're looking through that lens of spirit. And that's what spiritual psychology invites us into, is to look through a different lens.
God, I love that analogy. That is, I hadn't heard that one before, but while I'm hearing you say that, I'm also like visualizing that with each floor you get to, that opens up a new floor of that physical world space, that physical world experience, right? That gets to get explored. Just roll with me here, because things just happen.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing.
So are you following what I'm saying? So it's like so you had where you were at the ground level, then you get to the first floor, the second floor, third floor, and it's like and you're experiencing this whole new physical world reality, as well as we continue to elevate spiritually and heightening our new view. And that's amazing. I love it.
Well, and as you're speaking, one of the things that I feel really strongly about is that when we're on a spiritual path or we're experiencing spiritual growth, it's not linear. In our human, logical, left brain, analytical mind, we always want there to be a clear starting point and a clear ending point. And when we're on a spiritual path of growth and evolution, there is no clear starting point and no clear ending point. I think that it happens in a spiral. And even though, that my glass elevator is going straight up the vertical line, right? Or the soul line, like that we like to call it in spiritual psychology, I think our growth actually happens in a spiral. And so as you're talking about those different floors, I'm sort of sensing into the spiral, and every time you go up a little, you go out a little, and then you go up a little bit more and you go out a little bit more. And it's like that spiral of expansion.
Totally.
And that's what we're doing. We're all expanding.
Yeah. Because I think of that spiral thing as well, because sometimes you come across the same challenge, again, and sometimes we can judge it. It's like, oh man, I thought I already moved through that. But if we think of it as that spiral, as we're, and there's sometimes this like line down the side of that struggle or upset or frustration. And sometimes we come back around and we cross it again. But when we really look at it on a grander scale, because in life, I think sometimes the challenge is we look at it as a duality, like a light switch. Am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? Is it on or is it off? And I think of it more like a dimmer switch, or in this case, a lighting switch. And if I look back and go, okay, well, how am I doing it now versus 6 months ago or a year ago or 5 years ago? And then that often allows me to go, oh, wow, yeah, I am responding to that much differently, much better. And then I change my attitude back into gratitude. Right. Mm-hmm. And I love that. So I want to add something real quick is a shout out to the University of Santa Monica and Doctors Ron and Mary Holnick.
Yes.
And that is how Donna and I met. We not only both went to the school, but we were in the same class. And so we got to know a lot about each other. And Donna is just such an amazing person. And I really wanted to have her on because her transparency and her authenticity and the heart of gold that I know exists so deeply in her, and that she shines on everybody that she touches in life. So thank you again, Donna.
Oh, thank you, Danny. And yes, a nod to Ron and Mary. I actually spoke with them not long ago. A couple of weeks ago, I showed up at one of the worldwide gatherings and raised my hand. I haven't actually spoken to them directly in like many years, and they're just so amazing. I think they're getting younger.
Love it.
because the schedule that they're still keeping is pretty extraordinary given sort of where they are in life. So
Spiritual growth is good anti-aging as well.
yeah, for sure. But yes.
So you came to the University of Santa Monica to study spiritual psychology, but what was the catalyst? Was there a certain struggle or challenge that you went through in life that stimulated this spiritual awakening for you?
So I was a corporate marketing executive in hospitality marketing. I was working for the Ritz-Carlton at the time, and I turned 44. I turned 44 years old, which happened to be how old my father was when he died. And all of a sudden, it was like this inner alarm went off inside of me. And all of a sudden I was like, what is my life about? What am I doing here? Because everything in my experience was very much on autopilot, autoplay. It was like, another budget, another annual marketing plan, another, hotel problem to solve, another dollar to make for another owner, it was just like the same old regimented monotony that I wouldn't have been able to articulate it like this at the time, but it was killing my spirit. It was killing my spirit because I was in this trap of my own making. I was in this trap of my own life. And I turned 44 and I thought, oh my God, what is my life about? What am I doing? What does it mean? Why are we here? All the big questions. And I went to go see a psychic, which I had done many times. Like I have been a spiritual seeker my whole life, since I was 12 years old. I can tell you about a spiritual experience that I had when I was 5 years old. I've always been really into it, and always have known that there's so much more than we can see or touch or feel.
Sounds like connected. I'm also hearing more than just being into it. I wonder if there wasn't a certain sense or awareness of connection that also made you into it, if we want to call it that.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
Which is interesting that you bring that forward because I buried that. I definitely stifled that connection in a lot of different ways because I was trying to be somebody I wasn't in the corporate arena,
That you were supposed to be.
Exactly. I was really, like trying to make it in a man's world, and which is a whole other trajectory of this conversation. But so anyways, I went to a psychic crying to her, like, I've got to find my purpose. And, what is my life about? And this woman says to me, Donna, they're spelling it out for me. Spiritual psychology. And I said, what in the hell is spiritual psychology? And she didn't answer my question, but she said, there's 3 universities that teach a program in spiritual psychology. And she said, one of them is called the Sophia Institute. One of them is called the Center for Integral Studies. And she never gave me the name of the third one. So I went home and I consulted the real oracle. I Googled it. And in about 5 minutes, I found my way to the University of Santa Monica. And I began having conversations with an admissions counselor. I don't know if you know Veronica Allweiss.
Yes.
But so she was my admissions counselor, and God bless her, Danny. God bless her, right? So here I am.
How many questions did you have?
A corporate executive, very trapped in physical world reality, like very left brain, very logic driven. Everything's got to make sense. Everything's got to add up. This poor woman, I must have asked her hundreds. I actually still have some of the emails, which are quite hilarious, because I'm trying to wrap my head around how am I going to get a master's degree while I'm working 65, 70 hours a week, in this hotel career.
Wow.
And honestly, do you know what she said to me? Like, after so many phone calls, after so many emails, after so many questions, she finally said, Donna, listen, why don't you just come for one weekend and try it out and see what happens? One weekend, my whole life, like my whole everything was totally transformed, turned upside down because of one weekend. And, we don't often talk about this. And I've actually never talked about this to anybody before, but the fact, and I don't even know if they still do it. I hope that they do. But the fact that the University of Santa Monica let people pay like every month to go to that program, because I went for like 5 years. I've lost track of how many years you went, but I went to like every damn program that there was, right? So the fact that I could pay them every month when I was going did a couple different things. Like, one, I was always sort of renewing my commitment. You know what I mean? Like, I'm all in on this. And I was all in last month, and I'm still all in, and I'm going to be all in next month. But the fact that I always had that getaway car, right? Like, there's that back door that like I could escape to if I needed to. That made all the difference for me. It really did. Because if I had to plunk down, 15 grand
Oh yeah.
for the year one, I wouldn't have done it.
So check this out. You're making me realize right now, well, you know what Ron and Mary were doing, right? They were doing the very technique, one of the many that they taught us about doing experiments.
Oh, right.
Toss. It was like, well, just let's not commit, because our ego is so resistant to making like, whoa, I gotta change it all and forever. I'm gonna have to do it this new way. Like no.
Yeah.
Let's just try it on. I always joke around and say, like, pretend like you got it at Costco or Nordstrom's. Right. Like, you can take it back and return it. You can always take it back. Like, you might like the top, you want to take the pants back, whatever, right? But I really wouldn't surprise you one bit that they understand that resistance that we have, that our ego has, and to create an environment to where you can just say, hey, try it on for one weekend.
Try it on.
You don't like it? And it makes it easier for us. So, I mean, I think that's really important. I'm glad we talked about this. I think that's so important for our viewers to understand a big part of this. And even when we're talking about the light switch and like let these small, easily attainable steps, how can we give ourselves a break and make it a little easier to just try it on in little steps and be patient? We don't have to fix it all at once.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And so that one weekend, needless to say, changed everything for me. I actually came running home from that first weekend. And like, let's give your audience some perspective on this. This was in 2013, right? This was October of 2013. That was a long time ago, Danny. It was a long time ago, but I went running home trying to convince my husband, like, babe, you got to do this with me because we're going to be connected to these people for the rest of our lives. I knew it. Like, for the rest of our lives, we're going to be connected to these people. And, we're a decade in now, and that is certainly holding true.
Wow. A decade.
Right. A decade.
Wow. Yes. Oh my, what a true blessing. You're reminding me a little bit of like how I had gotten there and some resistance that came up for me. And that's what I love about having you on today, because there's so many similarities and then so many contrasts from like an external view of like what gets us there, what it's about, the whole journey. And that's why I'm really excited about this conversation of like sharing the different perspectives that really at the root were the same and got us to the same results. And so for me, I had already been hurt for disabled for many years. And then I went through a crazy awakening with healing myself holistically. And And that took me on a whole new journey of wanting to help people that way. But then I was in when I came to the school, I was like in the happiest moment of my life ever. I'm like more profound than I had ever been. But yet I was seeking education and tools and skills, abbreviations behind my name, something that would, because I wanted to help people now. Right. And it was so like, oh, but what do I know? Like, I haven't been to school for anything. So I started studying holistic healing, and then I went down to San Diego for that, and ended up meeting a new friend through a friend, having a conversation. I was talking about this school that I wanted to create and how it could help people this way and that. And da, 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 da. And they're like, hey, I just heard of a school like that my friends have been going to, and he hadn't even gone yet. He ends up going after us, but he recommends like, hey, check out this University of Santa Monica. And I had already driven to San Diego to visit. And so I called them and I said, hey, I'm driving back to Sacramento tomorrow. You mind if I stop by and check it out? And as soon as I walked in the room,
I have the chills right now.
Right? Because that energy is just like beyond any questions and concerns. Like, and I have heard you talk about like I'm forgetting how to say it, but basically we have these different intelligences in us, right? Emotional intelligence, physical intelligence. And there's this part of us that knows that we often don't acknowledge. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
I love the way you talk about
it. But before I do that, and I'm going to actually attribute that to my coach, Robert Holden, because he was the one who created the 4 intelligences. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but I have to just comment on what you're sharing right now, because it's like we forget parts of our journey until somebody reflects it to us. I also had an experience where I was talking to somebody who was like, hey, I just heard about this school. I think I was talking to one of my friends about it, and he was like, oh my God, I think like my friends just graduated from there. And I was like, wait, what are you saying to me right now?
It's the same guy.
Any sense.
Okay.
Right. I know, but it's so weird. And what I'm thinking about as you're sharing this, and as I'm remembering my own story, is how spirit is at work here. And just like you're saying, there is this line of energy. And what I think is so cool is that we're all working on behalf of that energy, right?
That's right.
Everybody, all of our people, all of our classmates, all of our friends, everyone comes from that lineage, right? It's a lineage. It's a lineage of loving. It's a lineage of energy. And it's alive. It's dynamic. It's creative. It's intelligent. And it has woven, right? Like all the pieces together, like it sews together this beautiful tapestry of all of us. Like, and we're all like little pieces on this tapestry out working in the world. And I love watching how the energy works. Right. And like, that's what you were just describing.
Amazing. How
the energy works. So I'm just like having this revelation.
I'm feeling this conversation is going to be all like, oh.
I know. Well, I hope everybody else is having as much fun as we are.
Because already I'm like, oh my God, Robert Holden, love him. Oh my God. Remember we were assigned the book Lovability.
Yeah.
And I can remember where I was at. I was at the gym and I had my earpieces in and I was shooting basketball, listening to Lovability, and just having a profound experience.
Yeah.
Profound.
Yeah.
And I huge shout out to Robert Holden too, and the work he does, because he is amazing.
Yeah. So he's my coach. And I adore the man. He's amazing. So it was his book, Authentic Success, where he talks about the 4 intelligences. And this was really groundbreaking for me personally, because I grew up as, the daughter of Italian American immigrants. And I was taught from a very early age that I wasn't that smart. And so there was a lot of trying to be smart, to look smart, to place a level of importance on my intellect, my intellectual intelligence. And so there was most of my life that I honestly believed that was the only intelligence that we had, right? That was the only intelligence that we had. You were either smart or you were dumb. I was taught that I was dumb, so I was always trying to look smart. When suddenly Robert Holden reveals the truth that we have emotional intelligence and we have physical intelligence and we have spiritual intelligence. And so once I began to really understand all of these different levels of intelligence and these different levels of our multidimensionality, I was like, well, hey, I'm cooking with gas because I got a little bit of that, and a little bit of this. And like, oh, wow, I can give my damn intellect a break, can't I? I can just let it be over there in the corner. And I think since I've done that, honestly, I've gotten a lot smarter.
Isn't that the truth? It's like it's useful in certain ways, but we in our society, right? It's at least in America, we've made it king, and it's like that's what matters. And I was similar the same way growing up. ADD, dyslexia, of course, those type of things weren't even diagnosed then. And I sure the heck wasn't going to try to expose my stupidness in any way because I only could relate it to it must be me not being smart enough. But you're right. There's so many of these other intelligence and knowingness and awarenesses and strengths that we have. And how can we move into a paradigm shift that highlights those, and we can use those tools together. It's beautiful.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think we all have grown up in a culture and a society, in a nation that puts so much emphasis on what people are lacking or what they're missing or what they don't have. And so we have this energy around focusing our attention and our energy on what's missing, and so many so many of my clients I know, and for myself, run this story of not enoughness, right? Like I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not wealthy enough, I'm not, fill in the blanks enough, I'm not enough.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about recognizing the four intelligences is we can begin to take more stock in what we do have.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have and bring so many different things, so many different aspects, and so many beautiful facets and qualities and strengths and abilities and talents. And we can't ever get to those unless we take our attention off of what's missing.
That's right. So as you're going through USM, you're having an amazing time, right? And there's probably part of you that's going like, oh my God, this is torturous. So those aspects of you that were roadblocks in the past, what would you say was one of if one jumps out, what was the biggest roadblock that you struggled the most with?
Well, it's funny that we're talking about the intellect, because for me, it has to be the intellect. And what I mean by that, remember that book, Mindset, Carol Dweck? The difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And I absolutely grew up with a fixed mindset. And there was this pressure to know the answer. There was this pressure to like have to have it all figured out. And so I really went through so much of my life feeling like I had to have the answer, and like the self-imposed pressure that creates, that there even is like the one perfect answer, right? Like I believed that. And I
Right.
believed that I had to know what that was and how to have it all figured out. And when I became aware of the possibilities of what it meant to have a growth mindset, that, and this is what spiritual psychology teaches us, that all of life is for learning, right? So when we have that learning orientation to life, everything changes because I can look at any situation, I can look at any trauma, any drama, any shit show and say, hey, there's something for me to learn here. I just have to find out what it is. There is some way in which this thing, person, situation, circumstance is asking me to grow.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about that perspective is it's a perspective of personal empowerment.
Yes.
Instead of being a victim of your circumstances, you now, because that's one part we do have dominion over, is how we relate to something, right? And so doctors Ron and Mary Holnick love to say, it's not the issue that's the issue, but how we relate to the issue or ourselves while going through the issue, that's the issue.
Yep.
And it becomes a way of empowering ourselves. So, once you're tired of blaming it on somebody else and getting stuck into the right and wrongness of it all, and go, it is what it is. And now what's a way that, and it has, and I'll speak from my background of, law enforcement. There was an aspect of resistance when I was hearing like, oh, there's no right and wrong, no good and bad.
Sure.
I was like, really? What about that 9-month-old baby that was molested and the guy only did 9 months? What about that? And I would think about these things. But I was aware, a part of me knew like there's some truth to what's being said. But then the other part of me is going like, but how do you make sense of that? But as I became more of an observer of my thoughts, I go, okay, well, let me listen to that dialogue more. And then what else? If that were true, then what else would have to be true? And then I realized where my resistance was there was parts of me that felt like when you say that you would be condoning or enabling that wrongdoing. And once I was able to observe that, I went like, oh, okay, yeah. They just said it's not wrong, but they also said it's not right. So this is beyond, like Rumi says, I'll meet you out in that field, beyond right doing and wrongdoing.
In the beginning, it was harder for my ego mind, if you will, to work through some of those things. Sometimes I feel like today I can't see the forest through the trees, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I see it different. Like
Right.
I really see it differently now, to a point where maybe it might be difficult for some other people to relate to me or to relate to how I'm seeing it. Uh, and the way I would articulate that is the soul's perspective. And this is the part that's so hard for our ego mind to wrap its head around. My view is that the soul is here for the experience and that we come for it all.
Mm-hmm.
Period. We come for it all. The good, the bad, the ugly. And I'm from Connecticut, so I like to say the super wicked, ugly, right? Like, we come for all of it. And that itself is sort of a radical idea, because there's so much pain and there's so much suffering and there's so much anguish and horrible things that happen on this planet. And, we can't get our head around, why anyone would voluntarily sign up for that. And of course, in our humanness, we don't, or we wouldn't. But, go really high up with me on the elevator right now. It's like, if we're just in the spirit world, we're just ether, we're just energy. There's nothing to experience there. right? Well, I say that, but I don't really know for sure. But here's how I see it from my human perspective is the reason that we take embodiment, right? The reason that we come to this world of duality and we sport this earth suit is because it comes equipped with all of these senses, right? We get to see and taste and hear and smell and touch and sense. Well, you can't do that if you're just, energy. So, I mean, this might sound a little crazy, what I'm about to say to you next, but it's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to kill you in this life. And then we're going to come back in the next life and you can kill me. No, see what it's all about, like, I mean, I know it sounds totally crazy, but there's part of me who like really believes that that's how it works.
Right. Because there's a certain awareness to where, I mean, it's all energy. It just transforms. It's like burning a log and we think it disappears, but it's just transformed. I mean, energy is energy and it's constant. And in this human form, from this level of human perspective, it's like not cool. But they're on another level. It's like none of this matters, and it sounds cruel. Matter of fact, we were in our practicum when I had that awareness came through, and I almost got up and said it, but I did. But I was like, I had this profoundly, I was going to just be like, none of this matters. It doesn't matter.
Right. Well, that's, you're at the top of the elevator.
Matter.
Right. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And we take it all so seriously.
Right. And there was, but there's this element of, and this is part, I mean, we're going really deep into this stuff.
We
so
are.
Whatever. Let's do it. Half the people turned it off already. The other half are super intrigued, but hey, we're here. We're just here to share our experiences. And I always talk about, like, I'm no expert other than in my own life and my journey and what's worked for me. And I know you're the same way. And I can remember the point where I had created this world of bliss, and I had gained this certain awareness, and there was parts of me that wasn't sure how to engage in the real world still, and like, what does that look like? Like when it doesn't really matter, and like, the plain and the silliness of my humanness, whatever, and then realizing eventually realizing I wasn't honoring my human journey. Mm. Like I had a certain spiritual awareness of truth on that level. Again, we're talking like different levels. But then, even though I had lived in this life of bliss and wonderfulness, I also had created a bubble that was sheltered in a sense from a lot of the stuff that might disturb my peace and I realized there was still something a little bit missing. And that was because, and this is just, again, not something I read, but my own personal experience was like, my human journey had a purpose with being here also. And how do I have this awareness and knowledge of all of this and still stand in the truth and follow that the way that this particular experience of this humanness form of Danny McFarland, this aspect was here to experience. And then I realized, oh, well, and what had been the resistance. So what I'm saying is, for those that are like, I really want to create a change and I really want to inspire and I want to help people this way, there's still ways in which you can do it. The shift that I had was, it doesn't mean I don't go out there and still try to want to help people and shine a light, but the older version of me would have been attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
The older version of me would have been creating change because I needed to fix them because they were doing it wrong. It was bad. And there was going to be suffering if not. And the more enlightened version was this awareness of holding people capable and in acknowledging the experiences that they're having while also wanting to create change. And then I had this philosophy of a lighthouse that came up, because it was like, all of us are just lighthouses. Donna, you're a lighthouse. I'm a lighthouse. Everybody watching around, we're all lighthouses. And we all have what I say is our own truth. And part of the journey is like following that truth. And so for me, for a while I was living in this, oh, well, I'll just be in my little bubble. I was in my lighthouse, but I wasn't turning my light on. So those ships that were, or maybe were seeking my harbor, were just going by. And so there wasn't fulfilling that human aspect. But then I realized, no, see, the older version of me that became a cop and then wanted to start helping people holistically after I healed myself was very attached to fixing or making things different or better. But I realized, so when things didn't shift or change, then that would create frustration or upset, which is a lot of what we're seeing in the world today and up till now. And, but the difference now is, okay, we're turning our light on for those that are seeking that. And I'm not attached to a ship that goes by or pulls into a different harbor. And so I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It totally
I think
does.
Okay.
Yeah, it totally does. It totally does. And, I think what you're sharing, Danny, and I love it. It's a little bit back to the principle that we already talked about, like how you relate to the issue is the issue. It's like you're much more interested in being present through the process than, arriving at some destination out in the future. And when we can be present in the process, there is this honoring that takes place of the whole journey. And the honoring of that whole journey is the honoring of our humanness, right? And the trek that we make through the difficulties of our life as a human being on planet Earth, during this epic time of the world, right? In the history of the world. We're here like at a really kind of incredible tipping point. So what I'm hearing you share is, the enlightened view of like honoring what is as it is without having to make it different than it is.
I love it.
I think this idea about honoring our humanness, I talk about that a lot. I talk about that in Original Wisdom. And for me to get to that place, even though it's not really a place, but for me to sort of arrive there in my own consciousness required me to have a dance with breast cancer. And it was during that journey that I began to have this reverence and this awe for the human journey, right? Like for this epic adventure that we're all on. And that's really what it is, and we take it so damn serious when we're here. So it's kind of fun to bring the lightness and the playfulness and the altitude, right? The enlightened perspective of it, because then we see it literally from a different place. But for me, that was a big point of healing for me in all levels of my consciousness, to revere the human journey that I'm making. And we're all so hard on ourselves and ruthless with ourselves and unrelenting with ourselves. And, that's the one thing that I just want to give another nod to USM about, is the teachings of being gentle with ourselves, the teachings of bringing in that deep acceptance and compassion and understanding and tenderness for our human experience, and the permission that I can now give myself to do that when that was not in my upbringing. I mean, it just wasn't. And I think that has been a big turning point for me. And it's also a way in which I support a lot of other women who maybe are in that same mindset of, having to push and force through and, make it in a man's world and be all tough and wear your coat of armor. And it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that. And when we can begin to relate to ourselves with more compassion and empathy and tenderness and gentleness, and then that spills out to the relationships that we have with other people and other things and other entities and other circumstances and conditions. But being able to hold the human journey with reverence and awe and honor is a game changer.
Oh, so if I recall right, you were at USM. We were at school when you became aware of the breast cancer, right? And can you tell our viewers about how you initially it was brought to your attention?
Yeah. So I had a prophetic dream. I had a dream that I had a fish hook all the way through my left breast. And in this dream, I was looking at myself in a mirror, which is really interesting, metaphorically. And I'm looking at myself in this mirror and I see this giant fish hook that is punctured fully all the way through my left breast. And it's bloody and it's messy. And I'm fixated on the barb, like the tip of that fish hook that's like gone all the way through my breast. But I'm thinking to myself, it's not coming out of there with any grace, right? And so out loud in this dream, I say to myself, while I'm looking at myself in this mirror, how are you going to get out of this? And I wake up. And I wake up out of this dream. And my first thought was, oh my God, a couple of months ago, I noticed this, like, it felt like a piece of sand, like a little pebble of sand I noticed like on my breast. Danny, in one brain cell, out the other, like didn't give it a second thought at the time, literally. But my first thought after this dream was, ooh, is that still there? And sure enough, it was. And I didn't mess around. From that minute, I like got out of bed and made an appointment. And one appointment led to another appointment and another and another and another. And 5 days before my 47th birthday, I was being given a diagnosis of triple negative breast cancer, which is a very aggressive breast cancer. There's 26 different types of breast cancer. I know people don't realize that,
No.
So
there's not one. No, 26.
Yeah, 26
wow.
different types. And there's multiple treatment plans for every single type. So it's a journey to navigate for sure. And there was no history of breast cancer in my family. I didn't know what I didn't know about breast cancer. There was, no frame of reference at all, no context. And I was sort of going down this conveyor belt, and I use that word very intentionally. And this surgeon that I was with, and the radiologist, and the oncologist, they were all like, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You're going to have 7 weeks of whole breast radiation and, and it'll be fine. And I was like, well, it is what it is. This happened to be towards the end of our second year at USM. And my second year project, which is kind of like our thesis, I was giving a talk, my very first talk, in front of 50 people. I was designing and delivering this talk on how our thoughts create our reality. Because the universe has a sense of humor, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Well, even though I had to like go in and have this surgery, and my husband, of course, like wanted me to get it done right away, and the surgeon wanted me to get it done right away, I was like, well, we got to wait because I got to give this talk. And I set the date out in the future. I don't know, maybe like about a month, because I was going to give this talk first and then I would go deal with this surgery. Well, over the course of that month, I kept winding up in conversations where people were talking about getting a second opinion. Now, it had nothing to do with me. Like, most people didn't even really know I was going through this, other than the 180 people that were in our class. But like in my work life, and like I wasn't
Right, right.
talking about this. But by the time I wound up in the third conversation, like where people were talking about getting a second opinion, I was like, got it. Okay. So I called the plastic surgeon who did my breast augmentation, which I had had prior to this breast cancer diagnosis. And he gave me a recommendation of another cancer surgeon. Whew, it was life-changing that I wound up with Dr. Lisa Guerra with BreastLink, which is an organization in Newport Beach, California. They're amazing. They have like hundreds of volunteers that really help people move through their experience, especially people who are newly diagnosed. I actually am a volunteer for them as well. An angel, they're called. So we just support people who are learning that they have this new diagnosis and sort of what to expect. And you share your own personal experience with them. And so it's really incredible and rewarding. When I talked to Lisa Guerra, she shared with me that there was a new technology called interoperative radiation therapy, and she thought that I might qualify for it. And then she told me the device that they use to administer this interoperative radiation therapy is shaped like a fish hook.
Oh my God. What are the chances of
What?
that? Pretty good with
So
spirit.
yeah, I mean, it comes full circle, right? So I'm
Oh, wow.
crying, my husband's crying, like, and I ended up obviously working with her. The other group of doctors that I was with, I just dropped them like a hot potato. And when we met with Dr. Lisa Guerra, that's why I know there's 26 different types of breast cancer, because that woman took, and I'm not making this up, more than 2 hours where she sat knee to knee with Paul and I
Mm.
and explained to us everything that we could possibly need to know about breast cancer, about all the different pathways that a woman can move through a journey like this, all of the different possibilities, all of the rabbit holes. So we were so well informed and so well cared for in her loving embrace, is really what I would say. So it turned out to be a very important part of my life, uh, because it was really learning to love myself and honor myself, like I was saying, and to honor my own fallibility, my own uh, limitations of being human.
Wow. So what were some of the things that you needed to let go of? What came forward that you needed to release to honor and to love yourself more?
Mm. um, right and wrong. like the falling on a sword for the idea even that there is right or wrong, that there is a place in the middle, Rumi's field, as we would talk about it. Um,
Were you judging yourself? What would be some of the inner dialogue? If there's a moment you can think back to where you were being
yeah,
really
well,
hard on yourself.
I mean, to say that I had a relentless inner critic is really an understatement. The messages of the not enoughness, the not good enoughness, that I can never get it right. Um, I was wicked to myself. I was cruel. I was mean. I was um, the judger, the worst judger of. I was horrible to myself. I was horrible to myself. I was cruel and unforgiving. Um, I couldn't do anything well in my own mind. Um, yeah,
What did that validate for you? That part of you that was beating you up. What was the story? How was it? It never feels like it's serving us, but I know you know what I mean when I say there's
yeah,
in some way that pattern and program is there to protect us in some funky, weird way.
yeah. Um, the funky, weird way was the misbelief or the misunderstanding that there was a right way or that there was perfection to get to, right? Like I was measuring myself against something that I didn't even know what I was measuring myself against. And that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I work with all of these amazing women and they look right past their own magnificence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're trained to do, unfortunately. Going back to what I was saying before about all of this hyper focus that we have on what's missing, this hyper focus we have on what's lacking, what we
Right.
don't have. And, we got to make you better. We got to fix you. We got to solve the problem instead of, well, let's look at what is here.
Mm-hmm. Where did you feel like that came from for you, that programming?
Well, which parent do we want to blame it on? No.
Oh,
Danny, you remember the Enneagram, right? When we
absolutely.
were in CHH.
I
And
love it.
one of the most profound books that I've read over the last few years, which was not a USM book, I believe, was Mark Woolen. It Didn't Start With You. And he has all of the scientific evidence and proof that a lot of these patterns actually get passed to us through our DNA. And that was like, what? So, my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother, who might have experienced a trauma in her life, however many hundreds of years ago, like those cells then get passed forward to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And, I think this is how we have a lot of the, systemic racism problems that
Mm-hmm.
we have. Like this stuff is in our DNA.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to confront it, to love it, and to heal it so that we can be conscious enough to not pass it on to the next generation.
That's right.
And, I work with a lot of young women, like late 20s, early 30s. And I am just in awe of these young women who are consciously making the choice today, right? Like I didn't start waking up till I was 44, as we've
I
already
hear you.
covered. You know what I mean? But like these young girls that are already like, I'm not passing this along to my kids. I'm going to heal this right here, right now.
Yeah,
And I think that's pretty phenomenal. And I also am incredibly encouraged that I know that we've hit the tipping point on this.
definitely.
We have absolutely hit the tipping
Definitely.
point. And yeah, there's still a lot of yucky shit on this planet that's still coming up for healing.
Hmm.
And there are so many more people who are equipped to heal it, learn from it, and make a different choice going forward that is going to change the trajectory that has been in the past.
Absolutely. And again, kind of going back where we were talking about with the light switch, the dimmer, the reverse of the dimmer switch. It's like if we were to look back in our history of 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, like there's like we can do in our own self. Like it's right. The outside world's a reflection in a reality. So I've often found like if I'm being very judgmental or very perfectionist with others, how's that a reflection of how I'm that way with my own self? And there's a way we can focus on what we're lacking in the world, or we can look at like all the amazing progress. And what you're talking about right now is just a beautiful, wonderful example. And even when we look into our parents and their parents, it's not that far back for us, at least, where people were literally living in a survival mentality. So the more you're in a survival space, the more you need that programming in order to protect you. So of course, being really hard to make sure you don't do it wrong, so you don't get killed or you don't, whatever it is to survive. And that's the fortunateness of the progression that we've made. And even with technology in a way, we're creating more of a space now to where you and I can have a conversation like this. And the younger generations can be more conscious and aware of it and already do the work. And I'm sure they have their own version of something else because some of that same perfectionism pattern may be telling them, I got to fix this because, it's not, good enough or whatever. So there's always this dance that each one of us is doing, right, with our own formula that we came in to experience. So you brought up perfectionism, and there's elements of that I definitely struggle with. But when you were talking about this with your own challenge, it made me wonder if you had this experience with some, it may be like, I always need to be right. I had more a fear of being wrong.
Yeah.
And what that would mean.
Yes. I mean, that's very much what it was for me as well.
Yeah.
The fear of being wrong. Definitely.
Right. And so while you were being really hard at yourself, going through you became aware of the cancer, you're doing the work with it. And it provided, to me, it sounds like an opportunity to, even at a deeper level now, work with the forgiveness and the grace and the gentleness with yourself and to just be really present and loving with yourself. And you mentioned that lovingness and honoring. What were some of the ways that you incorporated that or shifted that?
The powerful tool that we have at the University of Santa Monica, compassionate self-forgiveness. And I was practicing compassionate self-forgiveness, and out of my mouth, I said, I forgive myself for judging myself as not loving myself. And it was like, wait, what just happened? Like, what did I just say? What? But you know how it is when you're doing that, you're in like, there's this truth that's happening that's beyond you. It's beyond your logical mind, because there's practicing compassionate self-forgiveness is a spiritual experience. people can do it from their heads, but if they're willing to do it from their hearts, then we open to spirit's guidance and spirit's loving and spirit's healing power. And that is definitely what was happening for me. And so that was a revelation. Like, that was a revelation right there, that I didn't love myself. And that invited a deep reflection about how I was with myself, who I was with myself, how I was with myself, and that's when I really began to see through the patterns of what was sort of on autopilot. These were ways that were default. These were my default patterns. And once I started to bring more consciousness and awareness and attention to what was on default, then I was present enough to make another choice. And that's what I did. 3-foot toss by 3-foot toss, step by step by step. And, even today, and I really, consider myself having a level of mastery over my own process now. Like, if I'm upset about something, the gig is up. Like, there's no point in trying to blame whatever it is, because I know damn well that that's not what the problem is. I've got to go be with me. I have to go sit with myself. I've got to get out my own mirror, and I got to look in it, and I have to be really honest about, what's going on. And, sometimes I still want to be mad at myself. And it's just such an ego pattern that I still, like my little girl, she's got her heels dug in. She's got her hands in her hips, man. She's pissed, right? And sometimes she just wants to be pissed. So
sometimes that's the opportunity, is to let her be pissed. If you're
100%,
right,
100%. So, but now I can let her be pissed without judging her. I'm
right.
Go.
Doesn't mean anything.
Get it
doesn't mean you're not doing your work. Doesn't mean
exactly.
And that's one of the challenges that at least I experienced a lot was in myself and in the world of spirituality, spiritual growth, personal growth. Is as our consciousness rises, so does our ego gets a little smarter. and our experience in the world is a lot in meaning the best, but a lot of what I call playing the same game, but with a new set of rules, which is judging still. Like, now this is spirituality looks like this, it sounds like this, it dresses like this, and like, whoa, hold on a second. No. But then there's the opportunity, like when I was going through that, was the opportunity of, okay, and they're human and they're on their journey. And we're all like, don't let my own, judgments of that come in. And yeah, which was just a reflection of how I was with myself. And then I had literally what you were just saying. I was like, Spirit, why are you guiding me into this now? Like, and that was acting. And it was the furthest thing from what I wanted to do. And I had ideas of like how I was going to help change the world and impact, and really amazing stuff I'd already started doing. It was like, no, need you to do this. First, it was like, no, I need you to leave space, which is like, this is going to be a lot of, you've been on this crazy journey too. It was like, nope, leave space. But for what? Nope, just leave space. I'm like, yeah, but what? Like, I'm ready to do, like, like, no. And then it's just trusting and taking that step. And then it reveals itself. And not the whole story, but the next step.
Not the whole story.
And then it's like, but getting back to why I had brought that up was I didn't understand, I'm trying to figure it out. Like, well, why And I realized I had so much of my own judgments around certain aspects of it. And it became a great vehicle to deepen in my personal growth.
Totally.
I call it like personal growth on steroids, because it was constant opportunity of like judging self and how can I release patterns around my, I needed to be good at something before I did it, not start doing something when I'm terrible at it. And it just became this exercise of stepping into action, do the best you can, and release judgment around it. And just, and now think about it. And then this revealed more of discovering my authentic self. Because I would always said, I'm very authentic and genuine, what I call genuine now. But I was very authentic to my to my conditioned self. Like, I didn't really know, going through life with all the different moldings and shaping of what would be better for me and not good for me, off of my perception, right? Created an aversion of Danny McFarland that was conditioned, and the things that I believed I didn't like and do like weren't authentic. They were based on, I didn't even realize it, because it's not like it even bothered me. It wasn't like, oh, I really want to do this, but I'm not. And like, no, for however long I already decided, like, this is what I want to do and this is what I don't want to do. And so for me, a big part of the journey, instead of like really stepping into something you've always wanted to do and like have the strength to write that book or do whatever you always want to do, it was like, no, I want you to do that's the furthest thing from what you want to do, because I want to know if you really are surrendering, if you're really going to trust me. No, I want you to do this, that you're like, that's the last thing I want you to do. And can you just surrender and trust and surrender? Because you said, and obviously this is a journey, right, of layers of moving to the space of being able to like dive. I didn't just dive into the deep end. It was, you take the steps down to the pool and work your way over to the deep end. But so anyways, how does that resonate to your journey and story of surrendering to the divine unknowing?
Yeah. Yes. Yes to all of it. It's like I see the spiral again, and how we were talking about like those sticky spots, right? It's like, oh, I thought I did this already. I thought I healed this already. But I call it judging the judging, right? And like, there's nothing more brutal than judging the judging. And to your point, it's like spiritual growth on steroids, because when you learn how to take responsibility for your own inner experience, and you're willing to do the work, you're willing to sit with yourself, you're willing to call your own bluff, you're willing to stop judging and start loving, shit happens, right? Like, then you get to the truth, then you get to what is authentic. And listen, part of how I see this, I came here to be Donna Bond. You came here to be Danny McFarland. Like, you came here to have all of the quirks and the idiosyncrasies and the personality flaws and triumphs that you come with, right? It's like, this was part of what I needed to do whatever it is I've come here to do in this life. And so why do I keep making that wrong? Why do I keep judging it? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Why? So I think at the end of the day, we can talk about so many different things and so many different paths and avenues and processes and aspects. And at the end of the day, it comes down to acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
It just comes down to acceptance. And it's happening because it's perfect. You know what I mean? If it wasn't perfect, it wouldn't be happening.
I love that. I say that often. Like, come on, like, we can get distracted by all the shiny objects. all the different things to work on in the process. And it's just like you just said, acceptance. It's all about accepting and unconditionally loving all aspects of ourselves exactly the way they are right now.
Exactly.
Not
Right
once we process them or we
right
change them.
now. Exactly.
Right now.
Yeah. So it's like the question of authenticity then, it's like the gig's up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because and definitely in my own process, I have had the experience of like wanting to be on the search to find my authentic self. Like there's
Hmm.
this quest to like go get that part of me. Well, if you can just get back in your own lane, just show up right here, right
Yeah.
now, then, oh, hey, there you are.
Yeah. And those little steps, of just, it's a journey, and that's the thing. Again, the grace and ease with us, we're on this journey of rediscovering it and recognizing and just trusting. I think a lot of it, come back to it too, is like trusting that inner guidance. So like what I was saying about being guided into something that was the last thing I wanted to do, but the surrender and trust revealed itself. And then I started to realize, like, I started to like things that I didn't like. I was like, wow, this is actually fun. Like I get to be a kid. And like, as soon as I let go of like any fear of doing it wrong or what it would mean to be wrong or bad or ashamed, embarrassed or revealed or whatever. But that was a journey. It wasn't like, oh, I just read it in a book. And like, no, we have to step into action and just keep surrendering and trusting, knowing that on the other side of it is the experiences that we were meant to have. And regardless, if we quit attaching, like looking outside of us at the result that determine if we did it right or wrong.
Mm.
Like when I'm doing that, then all of a sudden the person I dated last that didn't work out, I go, see, I can't trust myself. See, I did it wrong, because we're looking at the outside for validation versus recognizing the success isn't just showing up for yourself in alignment with that little one in you and that guidance that you're getting.
Right. Well, I have made a life of living into the divine unknowing. And I was going to say checking into USM. I mean, that was going into the divine unknowing for certain, walking away from my very prestigious, high paid, secure job, career, really, a 28-year long career, walking away from that. That was stepping into the divine unknowing.
Can I ask you a quick question about that? Because you just reminded me of something that, some of our changes, like obviously I got hurt and I was forced into a different way of life. What I think is really interesting about your aspect is who you were in a space to where you were super successful. No one was forcing you out. It had to become, there's another element of choice that comes into that. Like essentially you've created the quality of life that you thought you wanted. And do you really take on blind faith the leap to leave all that behind for unknowing?
Yeah. It's pretty insane, isn't it?
So share that a little bit about
to do it again.
Good. I love it. It becomes exciting.
It does become exciting. And I actually see it that way now. I see it more as exciting than terrifying. Danny, the truth is that even though that looked all pretty and shiny and perfect on the surface, I was dying inside. My light was going out. I was dying. And it's funny, I don't know, there was something that you had said that reminded me about my first year at USM, blaming it on somebody else. All I did was bitch about my boss for the entire first year of USM. All I did was finger point and blame and bitch about how someone else was making my life miserable. And when I stepped down from my role with the Ritz-Carlton, that was really me taking my power back to say, enough is enough, right? Like I keep going to this place and doing this thing that is like an inversion inside my person, but I'm the one who gets up every day and keeps going there. Right. So it was like, I'm doing it. No one else is doing it.
Well, part of you playing in the whole thing,
exactly.
Right?
So that was really me, like the reclamation of my sovereignty was stepping down from that role. And I mean, yeah, it was scary as shit. I didn't know where my next paycheck was coming from. And there certainly wasn't, I didn't know I was going to be a coach then. Like, and you might not remember, but when I stepped down, I hung out a shingle as a marketing consultant, so that I could still generate some income. And we were actually in CHH at the time. And so the whole year that I was in CHH, I was like working as a consultant. I'd work like 3 days a week, and I got to spend all this time on my spiritual practice and my studies at school, which was amazing. And how I became a coach was a trick that the universe played on me, which is a whole other story. But, and funny, Dr. Robert Holden was just saying to me that I should be teaching about alignment, because that's what you need really to make these choices to step into the divine unknowing. And, hot off the press, I've not spoken publicly anywhere about this yet before this very moment. Here it is at 12 o'clock on the 20th of May already. Paul and I are leaving Southern California permanently, and we are relocating to Costa Rica. And, Danny, there is nothing that I can put on the list of logic around this at all. Like, there's nothing logical about this. And I have recently spent a lot of time in Costa Rica for, a whole other slew of reasons that, are not relevant. And last time I was there, which was March and April of this past year, I kept getting these really powerful waves of knowingness, like that I am to come here. I am to be here. Like, this is next on my journey, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? Like, I just published a book. It probably makes sense for me to have contact with, the world of Southern California, where it's much easier for me to sort of be seen and be out there and show up in places. But no, I'm going to the jungle. I'm going to the rainforest. And what I know my mission is to embody more of my soul, period. End of discussion. Like, that's what I came here to do. And as I do that, it's my honor and privilege to share my experiences with whoever wants to listen. But that's really what it's about for me, right? Like, it's how can I embody even more of my essence, my spirit, my original wisdom, and how can I live from that place? And for whatever reason, this is Spirit's plan, right? Is that I'm going to do the next leg of this in a foreign country where I don't speak the language, where, it's pretty effing hot. I'm a middle-aged woman. Let's go. Like, what? It's kind of crazy. So it's kind of insane.
This is something that I don't think we mentioned, but that was coming forward for me earlier, that circled back around, was how when we're coming from this attitude of like needing to get it right, the perfectionism patterns and worrying about doing it wrong, we don't usually subtly recognize is that's also coming in. Like, if that were true, what else would have to be true? And what else would have to be true is, well, if I have to get it right this time, it means I won't get another chance to get it right. I won't have another chance to do it which then also means I'm coming from a scarcity mentality, a lack mentality. And is that what I'm wanting to, on a conscious level, embrace in my life? And so when I become aware of that, then I start to go like, oh, okay. Because I love it. You're talking about your book, these different things that logical, rational, but then it's like, whoa, but what's also attached to that? Like that this is what needs, this is supposed to be how it works. And you're, what I hear you saying is going like, yes, and yes, all that's true. And I'm being guided to do this. And you're stepping into that, and you're having that trust regardless of the outcome, because you're knowing that trusting your inner guidance and trusting self is the most important thing with staying. And you brought up alignment, which was, I love that. So we're going to dive into that, because that's a huge thing, word for me that I love working with as well. And what you were just talking about your work reminded me of a question. We got a question from a viewer, Matthew.
Ooh.
Yes.
Hi, Matthew.
And Matthew had recently left a corporate type world where he was continuing to get promoted, seemed amazing, making more money, absolutely hating it, and has made the decision to leave that and step into this divine unknowing. And his question was around, what would help me with discerning between my inner guidance and, let's just call it, the conditioned self. Like he's on the path, but then also recognizing things are coming in and getting him kind of scrambled sometimes. And he's wondering what could support him in discerning.
Yeah, I love this question. So I want to invite Matthew to tune in physically to the sensations that your body receives as you mentally align yourself with different pieces of information. Like, so for example, if you're thinking about leaving your job, when you think about leaving your job and you tune in to the sensations that you're experiencing in your physical body, do you have a sensation of expansion, or do you have a sensation of contraction? So then it's like, okay, well, if I stay with my job, do I have the sensation of expansion, or do I have the sensation of contraction? And if we look at Dr. David Hawkins' scale of consciousness from Power versus Force, or Letting Go, Dr. David Hawkins taught us that the higher levels of consciousness, joy, peace, aliveness, that these are all higher places on the scale where things are naturally expansive. And our true nature, because it is comprised of the energy of loving, our true nature is synonymous with those higher levels of consciousness. And even though we're out here in the world, down on the ground, searching for joy and peace and happiness, and we try to do all these things that we think are going to bring us joy and peace and happiness, the truth is, if we can just align ourselves with the truth of our being, then we naturally experience the derivative of who we really are. The derivative of that love is joy and peace and aliveness, which is a sensation of expansion. So I use this as a little roadmap, essentially, to find my way through things that might not look logical, right? Because your mind has all sorts of rules, and it's measuring things according to a different map.
Right.
But we want to get on the map of your soul. We want to get on the map of your higher self. And so when you can align with what your soul interprets as expansive, then you kind of know that you're headed in the right direction.
That is amazing.
Did
It's
that
amazing.
translate? Okay.
Yes, 1000%. And people were just eating it up right now. They're like, oh, because that's it's so important to connect to those sensations and bring them all in. And when you're in that space, and that it helps you to identify that and anchor it in when they become in the future. And also it's making me think of one of the things that really supported me of becoming more of an observer of those thoughts. I think I heard one time where it was like, we're the ones in the theater watching the movie. We're not the movie. And so it's like, we're still in it. Right. And you're still very enthralled into the movie, but there's also part of me that knows like, I'm not the movie. Yeah. And so I think of that with all the dialogue that runs through our heads. And I'm reflecting back onto Michael Singer's amazing book, Untethered Soul. And I think he does an amazing job of speaking on becoming more conscious, of becoming more of a conscious observer of those thoughts.
Yeah. Well, when we can do that, we remove ourselves from the polarity. We remove ourselves from the duality. And it's being in the middle, right? It's like there's one extreme and the other extreme, and you've got these two extremes, these two polarities. But when we're the observer, we collapse time, we come fully present, we're in the middle. And it's from that place in the middle that we can then access this vertical line, the line up, the line to spirit, where we're not then in the ping pong game, right? The right, the wrong, the good, the bad, the up, the down, the black, the white, which is where we live when we're in the physical world. So when we become the observer, all of that collapses into right now, right here. And it's from this place that we actually have access to everything that we need, to everything that we need to know, to the one mind, to universal consciousness, because it all happens right here, right now.
It sounds like original wisdom. Can we talk about that beautiful book sitting behind you right there?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I know. Well, this was actually this was a little bit of a roundabout, to be honest with you. I wrote a workshop, really, and it was my intention to deliver a workshop. And I was like, oh, I need a teaching story for that point. And I need a teaching story for that point. And so before I knew it, Danny, I was like, oh shit, I think I just wrote a book. Yeah. And literally that's what happened. So this came out just a little over a year ago, in March of 2021, Original Wisdom, Harness the Power of the Authentic You. And, you know, this is my whole story about leaving corporate America, resigning my position, finding my way into being a spiritual coach and a practitioner and a lifelong student of spiritual psychology.
And resident of Costa Rica.
And whatever's going to happen next, which, who knows what that's going to be? Who knows?
It does get exciting, man. When I realized at one point, some people do their work because they want it to stop, but they don't realize it's like, no, that's what we're here for. But once we change how we relate to it, then it doesn't have to, that perceived suffering doesn't have to be as bad. And then we start to enjoy. I mean, it's so exciting to me. I have an engineer kind of mind, so starting to see how it all is designed and comes together. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. So in regards to trusting self, in regards to getting into alignment, is there any tools or I believe you had something called 3 invitations?
Yeah. Thank you so much for remembering. You can just go to donnabond.com, and right on my homepage, there's a new mini class that I just published not long ago on 3 invitations into a deeper level of self-trust. And so there's like a couple of hacks in there, some things that you can do right away. But yeah, I invite your viewers to go check that out. And, if you want to grab a copy of Original Wisdom, it's on Amazon and, all of your booksellers. If you want an autographed copy from me, you can order it on donnabond.com. And thank you so much for having me today. This
Oh my
is
God.
so great.
Are you kidding me? It's been such an absolute pleasure. This is such a big part of what I've wanting to do with this channel, and just really bring on people that are heartfelt, that I trust, and I know that they are genuinely doing the work to shine more light and bring more love into the world. So I thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to doing. And I do want to real quick also shout out, I know you're in the middle of a master class, right? However, I'm sure you're going to have more coming up in the future, and people will be listening to this for years to come. So talk a little bit about your master class as well.
Yeah, it's called Empower the Authentic You. And it's about self-reclamation. It's about the process of finding yourself and taking back your power and cultivating empowerment from a place inside of you rather than from things that are outside of you, because the things that are outside of us are fleeting. They're not going to last forever. Even though we might validate ourselves through what somebody else said, that's going to last about 5 minutes. So this is about retracting yourself from really the old rules that physical world reality operates by. And it's really about understanding universal law and how to work your life in alignment with universal law. And what does that even mean? And what are those laws? And that's what we get into in Empower the Authentic You. But the end result is really this sovereignty. It's this place of owning who you are.
I love it. Guys, go check that out. DonnaBond.com, DonnaBond.com. Go check her out. Reach out to her. If you have any questions, just shoot her an email. I'm sure she'll get back to you right away. We loved having you on, Donna Bond. And please hit the like button and subscribe so you get notified when new videos come out. We love you guys. Have a fabulous day.